Penny, I'd like to turn to you. Really interested in hearing your view on the question posed, perhaps some of your reflections on what Greg said, but also very keen. You'll have a very good understanding of what folks in Washington are thinking at the moment. We've heard from Greg a more UK, EU centric facing analysis of the question, but you, I'm sure, will have lots to say of the issue as it is viewed from across the Atlantic. Thank you.
Yeah, so maybe just to pick up on a few of the things Greg said, and also look forward to receiving questions from folks on the line. Is this a step back, or is globalization dead? Well, I think that depends on where you sit, right? Earlier this year, I hosted a conversation with several economists, including the World Bank and the WTO and others. And if you dig into the data and you look at things, globalization clearly is not dead. It may be slowing down, and it clearly is reconfiguring, but it's not dead. Trade is still growing, investment is still growing, connections are still growing. You have Africa, who is in the middle of one of the largest integration projects there is. And so while in some parts of the West, and I would go back and start with Brexit, and pull that thread all the way through to Trump, you see a backlash or a little bit of a pullback from some of the openness we've pursued for the past 80 years. But overall, I would not say that globalization is dead. So I think the question is, what comes next, and how do we structure ourselves accordingly? And again, I think the UK is a great laboratory for some of that with regards to what they've been doing, what you all have been doing since Brexit, in terms of how to reconfigure and to rethink of yourselves in that context. I think that's coming to the US. Now, I mean, Trump is a trend that's been going on for a while in the United States. So I would not tell you that what he's doing will go away. In fact, many of the tariffs or trade policies he put into effect were retained by Biden. And now that he's come back with Trump 2.0, he's kind of putting some of those on steroids, I would say. But what I have been maybe a little bit heartened by is, in my 30 years, I have never heard Democrats in the United States defend tariffs like I've heard them defend tariffs in the past few months. And I think that there's a growing understanding and awareness of some of the aspects and impacts of international trade that had largely been taken for granted in our society for a while. So I think the more interesting question, I'm happy to go through kind of where we stand on tariffs, why they're doing it, some of the recent comments that have been made. But I think the interesting question for all of us is going to be, after the tariff deals and the tariff stuff is done, what next? Because I think it's fascinating that the UK and India have announced a free trade agreement today. The US is not announcing free trade agreements with countries. They're announcing deals with country, and those are very different things. As Greg knows from his time, a trade deal is something that's generally short term. It's not durable. It's got a short term. It's got a short impact on it, and it can be overturned quite quickly. And enforcement is lacking. It's really it's an agreement on paper bilaterally. Whereas a free trade agreement, I think, is a much more durable document, with usually much more comprehensive. It does usually take a while because it's got a broader reach into societies. And there's usually a much stronger enforcement mechanism within a trade agreement than what you would see in a trade deal. So I think the last thing I'd like to talk about, maybe going to the point about who the champions for free trade are going to be, is that I think what we're seeing in the world today is how important scale and size are. So I've just spent the morning with a bunch of innovative companies talking about what's coming next with AI and with innovation and some of the things that are happening. And life is moving fast. It's moving faster than all of us can even imagine. And some of that is going to, and it requires more people working together. Now, the US is a big behemoth. It's got its own market. It can do things. But there are many and many other countries that are going to have to come together to have some kind of scale to deal with some of the changes that are going on in this world and to come together and develop the supply chains and the knowledge and the connections, whether it be in more informal settings, whether it be more formal like CPTPP. They're definitely going to have to come together in order to compete, not just on the day-to-day goods trade, but also on the services trade, on the technology trade, on a lot of the development and the innovation that's going on. Because without that, and without that openness to having relationships with other countries, many countries are too small to be competitive, and many countries are going to be even too small to take advantage of some of the innovations that are coming around. So I would just kind of say that, well, I don't think globalization is dead. I think we're actually going to need more of it in the world. The US may not be a central part of it anymore, and maybe, taking a different shape and form. I think the same is going to be true in terms of how people appraise their relationships with China moving forward. But that leaves a lot of countries like the UK that are going to be seeking and needing to do more trade and have more globalization in order to compete in the world that we're moving into.
Brilliant. Thank you, Penny. Again, thank you. Very insightful points you made there.